You really should see this as one whole unit here. He says the learning of dinim comes from in two drachim. There's two ways. One is mitzad svara, which he says Rotzelomar ki haseichel goes elioschein. There's something that the seichels must have. All this logical stuff that we're doing in Higayon is to sharpen our seichel so that we know that we're using seichel properly. But anything that the human reason can produce is one source of producing Dinei Torah, and the other one is Gezeres HaKasav. When the pasuk says it in black and white, what does it mean? He's going to discuss the second one first. What does it mean the pasuk says it? So he says that it means that it's written there as a complete kasav, in words, clear words, or it's there as a remnant, either the kesher, smichus, or yitoloshin. What does kesher mean? Kesher means that there's a gezerah shava, a hekesh between two things. Smichus means one thing is next to the other, or there's extra words. So, but what it does mean is that either the Torah is mechadesh, the din, or we're using our minds to mechadesh the din. And he's going to explain that out. Now he says when you need a kasav, the general rule we spoke about last week is svara lamali kra. A pasuk only comes when your mind, your reason would come to a different conclusion that the Torah wants you to come to, and that's the first rule. He says, "Akasev lo bolo adin ella hu ba'abor shemitzad asfor mibachutz hainu omrim behefech." That's his first rule. His first rule is that you need the Torah to write something down when you would have thought the opposite. And he proves it because he says if you wanted to say the same thing, so it's just mutar, so here's my little gray chart, okay? Or, by the way, he adds the Shloshis Reim Midos, okay? So you need a pasuk to tell you not X, for instance, when you would have thought X either be because of your seichel, a simple sword bichutz, or because of one of the Shloshis Reim Midos. So if you would have come to a muchar conclusion, then the pasuk has to now say against that, okay? So if you would have logically came to X, or through the Shloshis Midos, you would have come to X. And now, the only way you can know not X is if the Torah comes and writes it. So that's the rule one. The basic rule is that the Torah comes to Mahapech, to say the opposite of what you would have thought, either through logic or through the Shloshis Midos. Now, he says this rule of opposite, of course, only works when the Svar Bichutz is Mukhrach. But if you have if a Svar Bichutz had two possibilities, you could have logically said X or not X, so then the Torah can come and repeat X. So it's really Mistalik Minasafik. Since you Svar Chitzona would have been X or not X, so I have to repeat X because X was not the only possibility. Okay, so that's the second scenario. Now, what happens in the third scenario if the Svarim B'chutz is Mukhrach and the Torah does do what we said it shouldn't do? It repeats itself. So there we say it always comes L'mamayet. Okay, and it says only here and not everywhere, and only here, and whenever you want to say this din anywhere else, you're going to have another mafarish pasuk saying it. Okay, so that's right. Now, in Dalet, he explained to us how do we know that pasukim are limited or they're supposed to be broad. How do we know to extend the din throughout the whole Torah or to limit it to a case? So he explains that the first rule, when we say immediate strictly galit hacha, hachi galit galit hacha, the low galit, where it's a very limited case, is where the Torah decides to say the din in the smallest chiddush. Okay, so if an Isur exists in a Kohen, so which is the smallest chiddush because that's the place you'd most likely think the Isur should exist, so then you wouldn't extend it down to a Levi or Yisrael. Okay, so if it's in a Miyut chiddush case, so that means it's only there and nowhere, and it doesn't extend. Or, as he said before, if the Torah repeats what you would have thought, so then it also comes to Mamayit. Okay, like Shtei Pesukim B'Man K'Achad in London. If you have two Pesukim saying the same thing, so from then on you cannot extend. So those are the two rules of Miyut. What's the rule of extent? Of Midigoli Hachagoli, the Kol HaTorah Kula. So when, just the opposite, when the Torah is Megala itself in the greatest Chiddush, let's say there's an Isa in Israel, so that would be the greatest Chiddush, so then certainly you can go up the chain and say that that same Isa exists in a Levi or a Kohen. And he gives us one rule, he says, when it comes to Knaso, so then there's no logic. You cannot move it. Okay, so that was his exposition on things which are written in the Torah, either explicitly or through Ramazan. Now he's going to talk about how you use your mind to extend dinim. So he says like this. This is what we're up to today. Lamedis hadin b'halifusos minose l'nose b'derech svara hi be'echad mishnei drachim. There's two ways to extend a din from one case to another case. Two ways. It's either going to be the Mamatzin or the Kal V'chomer. Okay, let's see what he says. Omi Mishnah LaMishnah, wrote Salomar, Shnei Nosim Shavim, O Shnehem Chamurim, O Shnehem Kalim. When you have two subjects that are equal or equally Chumra, Machmir, or equally Kal, so then, Minatinas Hadin Be'echad Mehen, by putting the din in one of them, then Yigzor Hasvara She'iten Gam Hasheni. Intellect, your reason, dictates that the din has to apply to the second case. So the two cases are equal or equally strict or equally kal. So then when you see a din in one case, then in svara you will extend it to another case. V'zohi derech b'ma metzinu hanimsa b'talmud. This is called a ma metzinu. But we see over here we're allowed to extend over to the next case because they are equivalent cases. A variation on that is the Kal V'chomer or the Chomer Mikal. What does that mean? There, things are not going to be equivalent. They're going to actually have a relationship that one is going to be more strict than the other or more lenient than the other. What does that mean? If there's a chomer that we find in a nose which is kal, let's say that Yisrael can't marry a mamzeres. So there, nilmad osei nose, nilmad also the nose achechomer. So then we can extend that din in logic to a subject which is more strict, like the Levi or the Yisrael. So that's the Kal V'chomer. O minose chamor sheyesh lo kula. Yesh, say there's a kula that we find in a kohen. So then milmad ose lenose hakal mikol shekain. So certainly Yisrael will have that kula. Okay. Bezuhi derech kal l'chomer. So that's the second method. So the first method, which we discussed in Der Tfunos, and now it's coming up here, the first method of svara is to go from equal cases, two cases which are equal will have the same nasu, or two cases which are represent kal l'chomer. So what if there's a strictness in the chomer case, it's going to exist in, it's not going to exist in the kal case. If there's a kul in the chomer case, then it definitely will exist in the kal case. And going the other way around, if the kal case has a chumrah, so then the chomer case, like the kol definitely will have it, but if the kal case has a kula, so then we don't know really if it exists in that. It shouldn't exist in the chomer case, or else it shouldn't be brought there. So those are the two methods of learning misvara, through comparison and through greater and lesser. Now he says there's a third way that we learn through svara. The yesh derech gimel, it's doma l'mamatzinu. It's like the mamatzinu, v'hi derech hekesha. It's called a hekesh. Kmo shamru, makish eved la'ama ivriya. So I brought the Gemara. The Gemara wants to know how can you, the Gemara establishes that we can acquire a ama ivriya with money. Okay, it says, Ashkacha ama ivriya, it brings a proof. Hoel, mikadesha bekesev, makne bekesev. Since she can be married with money, so okay, she could be sold with money. But what about the Eved Ivri? Minalan. So it says, Omer Kro, ki yimcha lecha achicha ha'ivri o habriya. The pasuk says, when your brother is sold as an Eved, or a male slave, when your brother is sold as a male slave or a female slave, and works 6 years, so there, since the two subjects are found together in the same pasuk, so we're makish the din from one to the other. Makish the din back, since we know that the amivriya can be acquired with kesef, so we can then apply that to the evidence-free. Makish avayali etzia, how do we know that a woman can be married with a shtar? Was the question over there. The grays, I just added it in the rest of the chazal, because it says yotze v'haisa. What did that mean? The Gemara says umanayan sha'af b'shtar. How do you know a woman can be acquired even with a shtar, not only with kesef? Omakro v'yotze v'haisa. She shall, talking about when she gets divorced, she'll go out of this man and she will come into another man. There is makish havaya liyitzia. Since yitzia and havaya are together, so we put the two concepts together. Ma yitzia b'shtar, af havaya nami b'shtar. So this is not, that's why this number gimel, he's going to explain in 1 second why they're different. I think I'll let him explain, then we'll go back over it. Now what's the difference between v'hafresh b'nehem, ki b'mametzinu hus misvara kamo kal v'chomer. The mametzinu and the kal v'chomer are logical, reasonable extensions from one case to the next, either through equivalent or kal v'chomer or kal. But the hekesh hum mikol hakosef kedin gezeres hashava. Really, the hekesh gets its strength not because it's logic. There's no logical reason why the way a woman goes out, which is the way she should come in. There's no logic that says the two things should be equal. Just the pasuk puts it together. He actually says the hekesh is stronger, a stronger method of learning dinim than the mamatzinu. Why? כי הקל וחומר ומה מצינו בעבור היא עושה מכוח סברה, יש להם פירכה. Since the basis of the Mamatzino and the Kal V'chomer is a logical basis, you're taking a factor in both cases and saying that they're equal or greater than. So he says, Svara, just like you made a similarity between the two cases, you can also make a difference in Svara. You can Yesh Lahem Pircha. But when it comes to the Hekesh is a Gezeres HaKosev. Mitzadi Yosem B'koach HaKosev, since it comes from the Torah putting it together, Ein Lahashiv Kenegdom. So then you can't ask kashas because the pasuk put together. Gezeres HaKosev Hu. So that's very interesting. There's pure reason saying two cases are similar, therefore they should have the same din or kal v'chomer. And then there's a hekesh, which is really things that are put together not because of logic, but because the Torah put them together. And that's why we move the din from one to the next.
So I guess this is where the Sefer Higayon comes in, is knowing where you can compare things, where you can't, what's similar, what's not, and understanding the attributes and the aspects of anything.
Right.
So you could either...
And that's very, very, very tricky business. It's a very tricky business. Because everything, as he says, and that's his whole idea really in Dr. Martin's Sefer Higayon, is because things have a lot of attributes, and you have to know what is the critical aspect. We say the difference that makes the difference, or the attribute that makes the difference. Okay, and that's a tricky business, and that's why in Svara we say, okay, these things. Matter of fact, a famous Gemara in Baba Kama, you see, it's all about that. Which attribute, why would you have moved from shore to Mabo, the shore, you see? And why wouldn't you? What aspects are similar and what aspects are not similar? And that really, when we deeply get involved in that mission, that's what that mission is talking about, because it seems that they have a common quality, and yet, if they have a common quality, now you just have to write one, and from the common quality of Dark and Lahazik Shmir Samalech, let's say, the Dark and Lahazik Shmir Samalech, that's common quality, so I just have to write one, and I could learn all the other ones from it. So then, the problem is, why did the Torah have to say, repeat itself 4 times? So then we have to make distinctions. We have to say it's not mukhrach to go from one to the other. Because logically, you could have had 2 possibilities. You could have said that the lower common denominator of Dark and Hazik is the reason why the Torah picked shore, for instance. Or maybe it was the higher common denominator of Karen. And therefore I couldn't learn the other ones out because the other ones don't have Kavan or Hazik. So because I have the 2 possibilities to learn from the lower common denominator or the higher the unique aspects, and then I have to write the other 3 psukim. Okay, so this is exactly where we need Higayon, but it's a tricky business to understand what aspect is called a critical aspect. That does it. Okay, and a lot of times we need help, with this short, to know that Karen's Kavan Lahazik is something you may have thought about logically. I mean, you should have think about it, but it's not so easy to describe. So
it's also not. Yeah, it's not. Well, it's not also not so obvious.
Quite a lot in defining, and it's not obvious. That's correct. Well, we know that Torah says that when an animal gores another animal, you have to pay. But you're right. What was the quality in the goring that did it? Maybe the poking is what does it. Why do you say kavanah? It's true that that's one of the attributes of it. But here we go. When we're studying Higayon, is it an atzmiyatz, bilti shalom, shalom, yuchad, exactly. So that becomes the tricky nature, and we live on extending them. So it's critical, and we live here, and not everything is exeres akasuk, The Torah understands that it's talking to reasonable people that should be able to extend dinim from one place to the next. So I'm just saying it's a very, very tricky business and has to be done very subtly. And the Gemara itself argues many times about that quality, what the quality is and can it be extended and what the differences are and are they critical differences. And we see it many, many times. Okay, so that's what he says at this point. He says when you're learning from Svara, it means you're using your ability to compare things and saying if things are equivalent or kal v'chomers, so then we should move them. And then he says sometimes the Torah itself, through Gezeres HaKasav, makes things equivalent, not because they're logical, but because it wants to put two things together. Okay, so he says that has a stronger force than the logical things, because logical things, just as you found a quality that is common, you may find a quality that's uncommon. But if it's a hekesh that's made through a pasuk, so then it's very, very powerful because it says we're not talking about simple common sense or logic. We're talking about a din that the Torah put together through the relationship of the two pasukim. Okay. So he says here, what's the difference between now a kal v'chomer and a mamatzino? So we see the difference between the hekesh and a mamatzino because one is is stronger because the Torah puts it together. That means it doesn't matter what your logic thinks, that the Torah made it equivalent. But what's the difference between a kal v'chomer and a mamatzino? He says. So he says, ki l'mamatzino pirchinan kolvehu. When you make a mamatzino, so you can destroy that comparison with any difference. Well, it has to be significant, but a small difference. But a kal v'chomer tzarech lihiyos pirchaso atzmis v'chazaka. But a kal v'chomer has to be destroyed with an etzem and powerful, an essential and powerful difference. Okay, and we can understand why, because a kal v'chomer is a mamatzino plus. It's saying the two things are not only equal to each other, but one has relationship, but one is more kal v'chomer than the other. So if I want to destroy it, so it has to be, since they're already equivalent, like the Israel, Levi, and the Cohen all have a very common factor of being Jewish people. So if I'm going to destroy a kal v'chomer, between them, I'm going to have to do something that's very, very powerful. Now, how this works out in the Gemaras, you have to see as it plays out. I would love to be able to give you examples of kol dehus and not. I mean, we do have the Gemara of the Zikim, but to define specifically, that would be a little work. We have to do that too, Vesivashem. Okay, he says like this. Ulechein, keshenimsa shnei nosim. Now, if that's true, that you can create dinim through comparison of two subjects, or two cases that produce the equivalent cases producing the same law, he says, Ulechein, keshenimsa shnei nosim, shehem shavim, u mishpat echad lehem. So now, when you find two subjects, or two cases, or let's say two subjects, that are equivalent, and you know a din in one of them. Umevi oso hatana b'mishnah so l'tetelehem Torah echas umishpat echas. So you see two cases that are equivalent, and they're brought in the Mishnah and given the same law. I think Lahena. Okay. Yiksha haTalmud lisnei chada otese chada michada. So the Gemara will always say, listen, learn one or learn from the one to the other. So for instance, here's our classic case in Nezikin. Since the Havamina is that shore is like Mava, so the hidden question there was Lisnei Chada. If already I know shore is Chayav to pay Nezikin, so then why do I have to learn Mava? Lisnei Chada. Because rules of equivalence should mean that if one case is given and another case is equivalent to that case, it should have the same rule. Ki achar shehem shaveh, since they're equal, the shor and the mava, there's no chiddush of one over the other one. Lama lo l'tana l'tarech. So why does the Tana bring both cases? Shor and Mava, in this case the Torah. Let's just write one and I'll be able to derive the other one. The lav karuchla ligav shevelizo. We're not talking about people who are salesmen that go around selling their wares that show you 15 different knives, even though there's no significant difference between one and the other one. V'yeshivu. So at that point, the Gemara that was doing the discussion will say, "Al kiyotze b'zeh tzricha diyash me'inan." So then, the answer, of course, is that we have to show a tzrichusa, right? If you would have learned, sure, I wouldn't have learned mava, and if I would have learned mava, I wouldn't have learned sure, because I would have said that it's the unique quality that's causing the din, and not the LCD. The im hashnei nosin eino shavin aval hem kal v'chomer. If they're not mamatzina type things, they're not equal to each other, but they resemble a kal v'chomer, yiksha teiseh kal v'chomer. So the Gemara, whoever's doing the investigation, will say they learn it with kal v'chomer. If I have bore already, and which is inanimate, doesn't go out to do damage, not alive, and it's chayav, so kal v'chomer, you know, the other ones, that's something that the Gemara asks. The Mishnah just went down the tree from Shor and Mava down to Aish and down to Bor. But the Gemara says, why don't we go up the chain and say, look, if the Torah already writes Bor, so why can't you say Kol Shekin the other ones? Okay, and it adds Bor with one other one because it has to eliminate certain qualities. Okay. Okay, so that's basically, we discovered that when things are two similar cases should have the same din, and we can learn one to the other, but if they're both presented, then it's a kasha, because really we don't want any repetition, whether it's in the Chumash or in the Mishnah. So now he says, Lifamim Yamotze, Sheyiksha v'im Isay L'snehai. If the Tana already brought this case, let him learn another case. Okay, so that seems against our rule. I mean, why do you have to? You think he's karuchla? He's like a salesman. He has to show you 15 different knives. So that looks apparently that it's a little bit obscure to what we're saying. Ratzalama. The im emishu sheyesh lo sheilu hashnei devarim mishpat echad lehem. If the truth is that these two subjects have the same mishpat, the same law, hayla lomar gam ken zeh kamo echad. He should have said the second one like the first. Okay, so the Gemara says, wait a minute. If the Tana only talked about case A, now you want to tell me that case B also has the same law of case A. So the Gemara says, wait a minute. Im lisnei hai. If that's true that case B has the same law as case A, then he should have wrote it. Okay. He's going to explain himself. Looks like, why does he have to write it if you can derive it? But sometimes someone says, wait a minute, if you already taught, if it's true that case B is chayav, let him teach it. Okay, then emes sheyesh lo sheilu hashnei devarim mishpat echad. These two cases were really the same, A and B, so he should have taught it. It must mean that B doesn't have that din. And the gray is from another girsa. We'll read it. V'hine ze nira hefech ma she'amru delo karuchla. Now this looks like against the rule of being a salesman, because you're telling me if he brought this case, then he should have brought this other case too. Aval Yishuv Dabahu tells us an important principle. Ki kashiyesh chidish yoter ki ba'osei haloshin shelo heviu. If there's a great chiddush in the case that was left out, then they ask yikshiv in isei l'snei. Then they say if they brought case A, then they should have brought case B, because case B was a greater chiddush. So it's not that just case A is equal to case B. If case A was equal to case B, they shouldn't be case B, because you would learn case B because it's equivalent to case A. But if case B is a greater chiddush, then they say in Issei, it's true that it's Chaim. So why did Tana bring the bigger chiddush? Why didn't only bring the smaller chiddush? It's missing. Now, Omnam keshehu shavim lo yikshavzeh. But if the two cases equal, you don't say, well, if the Tana already brought this one, let him brought this the equal case. There's the case of lo karuch. If two cases are equal, A is equal to B, so he shouldn't bring B if B is really equal to A. That you should figure out logically. But if B is greater than A, a greater chiddush than A greater surprise than A, so then he should bring B, because B is a greater chiddush. Now sometimes yiksha ze gam b'shinui ki atana yored. Now sometimes the Gemara will accept the fact that a case is left out, and it says like this: Ki hatana yored limnos kol hanosim sheyesh lahem osodin. When the Tana is going to spell out all the cases that have a certain din, if he lists all the cases, so they say Amrin hol v'nachas Tana l'minyana. Lisnei, that should be, yeah, lisnei, that's a typo. Lisnei nama high, not litnei. Okay. Since the Tana is bringing all the cases, then it should also bring this one. Mistake. Lisnei nama high. The yeshiva lo Tana v'shayer. So in that scenario, the Gemara will say Tana v'shayir and say high shayir to high shayir. If the Tana does bring, for whatever reason he does, all the cases in a certain din, like all the possible chilukim that you can have in a din, so then if he leaves something out, you say, why did he leave it out? So the Gemara will say Tana v'shayir. He left something out. But the Gemara always says high shayir to high shayir. I mean, in other words, the Tana never leaves out just one case. When he brings a list, he'll always leave out a minimum of two. Okay, and this is the other original text, the Yeshivu Tana B'Shaya. Wrote Sulmar, Kilo Mana Kulam Rak Mitzasa. Okay, so we're talking about, in this little section here, learning by logic, learning dinim through logic, which means if two cases are equal and one, the din is said mefarish, then we should be able in logic to extend it to the second case. Okay? Now he's going to go to our exceptions here. Ulifamim, gam ken hatana yomer techila hanose ha meyad chiddush. Sometimes the Tana will tell you a subject that's a smaller chiddush, like an Isa for a Kohen. V'achar kach yomer hanosu sheyesh bo yoter chiddush. And then he'll also tell you the Isa of Israel. V'zeh derech hanoag yoter b'talmud. This is the normal way, as opposed to the opposite way around, that the Talmud does work. However, we will ask when we see that, when we see when the Tana is talking two cases where one really could be learned kal v'chomer of the other one, so the Gemara will ask, Shiyomer Hanose Sheyesh Bo Yoter Chiddush. Why did it tell me the Yisr of the Kohen? Of course, I'll know the Yisr exists in the less Chiddush in Israel. And the Gemara will answer, B'doche, the Yeshiva Lozu Apsu Katane. The Mishnah here is talking in the form of Lozu Apzu. Not only this is also like the Kohen case, but even the Israel case. Kolomar, Lomi boy zehanose shehu yoter kal, afilu zeh shehu yoter chamor v'yesh bo yoter chiddush yeh zehadid. It's needless to say, the one that is more makel, let's say we'll have the Yisa, afilu zeh shehu yoter chamor. Let me read that again. Okay, let's see. Again, he's saying here we're learning lozu apzu. Not only this case, but even the greater case. Koloma. Lomi boy zehanose shehu yoter kal. Not only the one that is more kal. Ela afilu zeh shehu yoter chamor v'yesh bo yoter chiddush yeh lo zeh din. But even though the one that's more chamor and has a greater chiddush will have the din. That'll work with a kula, for instance. If you have a kula with the Yisrael and the same kula exists in the Kohen, say what you mentioned both in the Mishnah, so you would say not only does the kula exist in the Israel, lo zu, afzu, even in the Kohen. And he says that these are both going to be dochuk. We never like to say this because normally we'd want to learn from Kal Choma. But let's finish his exposition. Ulifamin yasu behefech. Sometimes it's not a lozu afzu, but it's a zu shein tzrich chlom marzu, which is less frequent. Ki yome techila hanose sheyesh bo yoter chiddush. Sometimes they'll tell you the greater chiddush, like the Isser of the Kohen. Ve'achar kach hanose miyate chiddush. Then they'll tell you afterwards the less chiddush. That the Kohen is aser, and then all of a sudden tell you Israel, it's a lesser chiddush to be aser. Excuse me, just the opposite way around. That would have to be with the Mako. If the Kohen is Mako, so certainly the Israel will be Mako. Sometimes they'll tell you the least chiddush first, and then in other words, the chiddush you'd most expect first, and then the lesser chiddush. V'al derek zu al hamiyut v'zara. But this way is very, very infrequently found. And of course, the kasha lab will always ask the kasha, ki acha she'omer hanose sheyesh bo yoter chiddush. You could already tell me the nose with the big chiddush. Like say a kal exists with the Kohen. So malo lomar acher shehu miyut chiddush. So then why do you have to tell me the kal exists with the Yisrael? Yeshiva lo zu ve'ein tzrich lomar zu katane. You're right. Zu ve'ein tzrich lomar zu katane. Really, this was the big chiddush, and they didn't have to say the minor chiddush. But he says ve'elu terutzim heina ahem dechukim. Excuse me. These terutzim are dechukim, very dochek. Lo yitnu rak al tzad ha'hechrach. Keshelo nimsa teretz acher, o tam yoter maspik. The only time we're going to use lozu apsu zu ein tzrich lomar zu is when there's no way out. We just have no other way to show why both cases are being brought. Shelo nimsa teretz acher, o tam yoter maspik. For some reason, we just can't figure it out. So then we'll fall back on that. But normally, we don't want to have any repetitions in the Mishnah, and that's our first move is always to show why both cases are not needed, and that you really can't learn that. Like in our Mishnah, lo hari zeh kahari zeh. If you had one, you can't learn the other. To say lav dafka, we never want to say, because really that's saying that the Mishnah is is saying a case that doesn't have to say.
So he's saying both.
Okay?
He's saying both the loizu abzu and the zubein tzarchlim are really dechukim, and really we don't have a good reason why the Tana brought down both cases. So we're sort of like, okay, we don't have a choice. We don't know why, and we're stuck.
Exactly. But it's only to be stuck. I mean, it's our last
resort.
We can't, exactly. When we can't find any other reason for it, so then we have to say, okay, lozu asukatani, which is lav dafka, we don't want to say it, but sometimes we're forced to say it. Okay? Very good. Now, he says like this, the next. Like I'm saying, these are all basic things that when you're involved in learning, you run into them and you sort of understand them. But to have them neatly arranged is a very, very important important tool. Now, la'olam kol nosei halo mebi chavaro hayalafu lo yeh bo ela b'mahalat milamdo v'lo yoter. Whenever you're learning, remember we're learning this whole section is about learning Isvara from similar cases or a Kal v'chomer. But he says when you do derive a din from one case and extend it to a second case because it's similar, you can't end up with a result that's greater than the source. You can't say Kal v'chomer, or certainly not Memetz, that the result is going to be more strict than the source. Why? Ki ein roi l'talmud sheyeh yoter chamor v'gadol mirabo. It doesn't make sense that the Talmud should be greater than the rabbi. V'al zeh nemar dayo levo min adin liyos k'mido. This is the concept of dayo. It's misspeak. It's sufficient that this law should be equivalent to the source that it came from and not greater. Okay, here's the example. Okay, I spelled it out. He just says, become a dialogue. But let's look at that example. It's a mission in Baba Kama. It says the following. It says, Shor hamazik reshus hanizak ketzad. When a shor damages in the reshus of the nizak. Now we're going to be talking here about reshus of rabim when a shor damages, and when the shor walks into someone else's property and does damage. So we want to know what's the din, the shor. That's going to be Karen that we're going to be talking about. What's the din when he damages inside the domain of the damager, not in the public area? Okay, so it says like this. Nagach, Nagaf, Nashach, Rovatz, and V8. If the shore now gored, pushed, bit, squatted on, or kicked, V'reshus harabim mishalam chetzi nezek. If he did any of those kavanah hazik activities in reshus harabim, so he pays chetzi nezek. Now, what happens if he does the same activities in the reshus hanizak? He walks into someone's private area and he gores an animal there. Here we have a machlokus. Rav Tarfon omer nezik shalem. Rav Tarfon says that he also has to pay nezik shalem by goring, not also. He pays nezik shalem, which is a chiddush, in the private area. We thought that if he's a tam, he always pays chetzi nezik. No, Rav Tarfon wants to say that I could show you that it's only chetzi nezik on Reshus Rabim, but in Reshus Yachid, of the Nizak, he's going to have to pay nezik shalem. The Chachamim Omri, no, chetzi nezik, just like he paid chetzi nezik in Reshus Rabim, he'll pay chetzi nezik in Reshus HaNizak. So now, Rav Tarfon wants to bring a raya to his din that should pay nezik shalom reshus hanizak. He says the following: Uma b'makom shahakel ala shein v'ala regel. Which makom is that? Reshus harabim, shu patur. Look at the reshus harabim. In reshus harabim, shein and regel are patur. So you see that the Torah is Mako on Shane V'Regel and Rishus Harabim. Okay, everybody walks around there, and what else are you going to do? You have to live. You can't watch your animal 24 hours a day, so it's on the Nizak to be beware in the Rishus Harabim when it comes to Shane and Regel. So in that in Rishus Harabim, the Torah is Mako on Shane V'Regel, that you don't pay at all. Yet, V'Hichmer Aleihem Shane Regel Rishus HaNizak. When it comes to the private area, all of a sudden you do have to pay. If your animal goes into another man's field or eats his crops, walks on it, eats the crops, you do have to pay. What? Nezik Shalem. So in Rishus Harabim, you're Patil Gamre for Shane and Regel. And Rishus HaNizak, look at that, all of a sudden you're paying Nezik Shalem. Makom Shehichmer Ala Keren Rishus Harabim L'Shalem Chetzi Nezek. Now, when it comes to Keren in Rishus Harabim, Torah is very machmir. It doesn't have a patur for Keren. Keren has to pay Chetzi Nezek in Rishus Harabim, much more than the Shane and the Regel. They're patur. So certainly, Eino Din Shenachmer Ala Rishus HaNizak L'Shalem Nezek Shalem. So shouldn't it be Kal V'Chomer that the Karen in Rishus HaNizak should be Nezek Shalem? It starts off as Chetzi Nezek in Rishus Harabim, in a place where the Shade and Regel is 0. So it already starts off Chetzi. So we should at least have what the Shade and Regel has in Rishus HaNizak. They go from 0 to paying Nezek Shalem. This is half damages to go to Nezek Shalom, he says. They should be equivalent. Omru the Chachamim, they said no. Dai lavo medidin liyos k'nido. Ma b'rishus harabim chetzi nezek, ha b'rishus hanizak chetzi nezek. It seems that we're learning rishus hanizak from rishus harabim, and just like in rishus harabim you pay Chetzi Nezek, so too in Rishus HaNizak you pay Chetzi Nezek, and you can't, through a Kal V'Chomer, extend the din more than the source. Okay, this is a very interesting Mishnah. There's a response to the Chachamim. The Chachamim come back against Reb Tarfa, and Reb Tarfa answers. It's a very complex little Mishnah. But the principle is the principle that we shouldn't, if you're saying one case is derived from the other case, so that the case that is derived can never be greater than its source. That's the general rule. Okay. Omnam. Im acher shlomen hadid mil melamdo v'natak etzlo im snifei osladin yeh b'mayla rabo ubederech v'signon shelo v'lo yoter o im yeh b'derech v'signon sheyesh l'talmid b'shar dinei ubo shabo b'forshim bo b'torah v'zeh yesh machlokas chachamim. It's a lot. Okay, he says like this. It's true, the general rule is that we don't want to end up with a derivative case which is greater than its source. Okay, how can you produce a tolda greater than the av? However, and that's a general rule. It's dial that you just derive the same din. Now you can't say it should be greater. However, there is a slight variation, he says. Say you do derive case B from case A. Now, if case B has certain peculiar strict, in general, it has certain peculiar strict sniffing, little areas where it's strict. When this new din comes into case B, are we allowed to include the chumras that case B have into this new din or not. This is a machlokas. Some people say no. Any case you derive from a source has to be equal to the source. And other chachamim say no. The din, once it's brought into the new case, can have certain chumras that the new case generally has. Let's see how he spells that out. So that's what he means here. It's a lot of words, but I hope you got that. When we transfer from a given case to a derivative case, so the question is, if the derivative case has its own little chumras here and there, are we allowed to let that affect the din that we moved over? Okay, we're not making a new din. Tal04 the din means you cannot take a source and create, like, go from nezik to nezik shalom through a kal v'chomer. That you can't do. But what happens if normally the case that you're bringing it into, the derivative case, is normally has certain sniffing that are normally chumrah? Are you allowed that to affect what you just derived from the source? So that's the machlokas, he says. In besniffing, also hadin yi'eh b'malas rabo u'b'derech signo shalo v'lo yoter. Doesn't mean now in all aspects, in all the little sniffing, little aspects, does this derivative case have to be exactly like its source and not more? Oh, in the derech signon sheyesh l'talmid b'shadinim, or it can the derech and the manner that the derivative case, the Talmud case, has in other dinim, can it affect what you imported? Shabbat meforish b'Torah. V'zeh yesh machlokas. Yesh mehen. Some Chachamim say, ki ma'acher shezeh hadin lamdu me'acher. Once you have a din that's learned from a source, v'lo bo meforish bo b'din atzmo. Excuse me. V'lo bo meforish bo b'din atzmo v'signon lo b'chol echad aminon dayo. And the source doesn't have these meforish little sniffing. So then, in everything you say, that's called don minei uminei. That means that whenever you're taking a derivative case from a source, then in every aspect, the derivative case has to be equal to the source, even though normally this derivative aspect may have certain little chumras here and there. However, Yeshua means, some rabbis say, ki besnife hadin ubesignon efshar lios bo maila chamora yota mirabo. Since the derivative case has normally some little chumras and other dinim, so there we can say that those chumras which we found already in the derivative case can affect the imported case. And it can have what's mafarish in the derivative case. These little chumras or sniff dinim can affect the imported din. And that's called don minei. We derived it from a source. V'uke ba'asrei, but we set it up in the context of the derivative case. V'al zeh omru, and I put it in the gray, but this is what he says. V'al zeh don minei u'minei. No, we have to, once we have an imported din, it has to be exactly equivalent to its source. And some people say, no, don minei, you're right, you imported it, but you can have the side little or sniffing side dinim that exists in the in the derivative case can affect what was imported. That's called don minei v'u'te ba'asrei. Okay, could the issa beperik b'shruas ha'edis u'b'chilas nida. The nafel machlokas ben chachamim b'reb Shimon gabi mikvah, in the case of mikvah. Omru Shnehem Lo Lamdu Elabit Mesota. Both of them learned the case from Sota Dukulishva. I believe that next week I'll bring that down. I didn't have time to go and import the whole case into the text. Umash Omru Dan Minei Ukibasre, but he says there is a condition here. Even the one that says that you're allowed to have the derivative case affect what you imported, it only is l'chumra. Umash amru dami neva ukiba asrei dafka l'chumra aval kula lo. Okay, you never say that the kulas that exist in derivative case can affect the imported din. Only the chumras. Okay, that is. Now here I'm going to need your help.
Yeah.
Okay. Of course, this is a piece that I'm not good. Up to there, you more or less understand what's going on? I mean,
yeah. That's it.
Okay. Yeah. The classical stuff. Okay.
Right.
Now
Right.
here you're going to have to help me out. Okay, because I don't really understand fully what he wants to say here.
Okay, I'll try to.
He
Yeah.
says, okay. La'olam
Should we try this next week? It's getting a bit late.
Oh, okay. Yeah, maybe we'll do that. You know, next week, you know what I do, Bli Netter? I'll bring the Dami Namine case in.
Right.
And I'll also do some more research over here. This is a place that's always got me a little...
Okay, Parasite.
Okay? So
Okay.
we'll stop here. That's a good place to stop. Okay, have a great week. Oh,
Okay.
yeah, could you email me your brother's going to
My brother, yes. He rented an Israeli cell phone, so I don't know the number. I'll email him. I'll get it from him once he lands, and then I can send it to you.
Send you a safer. It's fantastic, and you should have a bracha, tzlacha, and keep thinking.
Okay.
Clearly. Okay, Biba.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Have a good one. Okay.
Goodbye.